שלום לכם וברוכים הבאים לשיחה נוספת של PMI. אני אילנית פרימן, מזכ"לית העמותה, והיום נמצאת איתי Tabitha מאריזונה. Hello, Tabitha.
Hello.
I asked you to join me today because I don't know very many people who have their childhood in a farm as an inspiration to working in Intel. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, of course. My name is Tabitha, and right now I am the Ocotillo Site Tool Install Manager. I have been at Intel for about 21 years. And what you said is, yes, it is, yes. Actually started out as a tool owner when I started 21 years ago, and I've kind of moved my way in and out of construction throughout my entire career.
But you didn't have any experience in constructions, did you?
I did not. I did come from a semiconductor company prior to Intel, so I was an engineer there for about 10 years, but had not done any construction at all.
So how did you get the job then?
It's a funny story. I had been working with an engineer at the other company that was now at Intel, and some crazy way my resume came through his desk, and he said, I know her. She would be really good for tool install. She does some startup engineering work at a company called, Zilog, and we should grab her. And Intel had already offered me a position as an engineer in the yield department. So they called me back and said, hey, we changed our minds. There's this guy who knows who you are. Would you be interested in tool install? And I had no idea what tool install was. So I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. And it sounds like it's temporary work, not long-term work. And they said, oh no, we've got work for 7 years. It's basically construction. You'll be installing the tools. And so I was like, I'll give it a whirl. It's something different. So they changed my position, and I started out as a tool owner.
So basically, since then, you've been going from one position to another position, and you kept on, progressing with your career. And you told me something which was very, very interesting. You were trying very hard to build up a name for yourself. So even though you were working hard, you never asked for help. Is that correct?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't say I necessarily asked for help. There were times as I was kind of moving up in the company that I probably had too much work, and I didn't know to ask for help, I guess. And maybe there was a little bit of pride in there as well. Figured I could just push through it. So there was a few startups that I had done in IQ where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I remember coming to work when it was dark and leaving work when it was dark. And then when I got home, I would put my laptop on the table and start, working as soon as I got home as well. So there were some moments where it was a little chaotic for sure.
Do you think it was harder for you because you are a woman in this area?
I think it was different for me just because of that. I don't think that it's necessarily harder. I think that we just, we have to kind of approach things a little bit differently maybe. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I could do the work. I have a tendency to kind of watch the things around me versus kind of watch only what's in front of me. So I watched the movement and I watched kind of how things worked. And the first thing that I remember thinking was, I'm a tool owner now, but I want to be a construction coordinator. That's the next move I want to make. And I remember talking to my boss at the time, and he's like, well, why would you want to be a construction coordinator? Why don't you just move right into the project manager role? And I was like, oh, well, I guess I never really thought about that. And so he's like, yeah, you should go the next step and go into the project management piece of it. And so that's exactly what I did. After I finished the ramp, the Fab 12 ramp, I applied for a tool install project manager position. And at the time, there were no women PMs in, it was corporate services construction at the time. So I was the first that they'd had in quite some time. And
this past year has been particularly difficult, wasn't it?
Yes. So as soon as I took over, I joined the team as a tool install manager. The first challenge that we had in front of us was that they wanted us to convert the fabs in a really short amount of time. I think when I came over, they wanted us to flip the fabs in, I think it was like 14 months. And then I had been in the position maybe, 4 or 5 weeks. And they said, well, actually, we need you to turn it in 12. And I remember telling Mark, I was like, there's no way we can do this. I've been doing this for a long time. We need to really push back on the factory and tell them what the realistic conversion timeframe looks like. Then the next thing I know, it's 10 months. They said, we got to flip these fabs in 10 months. So, fast forward, I met Duran. Mark introduced me to Duran, and Duran kind of introduced me to this OCF concept. And we've actually been executing that OCF strategy over the last year. But basically, without this concept, the flipping of the fabs in that amount of time would not have been possible. We just could not have done it, especially the way that we've always been doing construction. It's just very, very inefficient.
So OCF is a very interesting strategy, basically based on 7 principles.
Yeah, so I think so. Everybody's very familiar with lean, and this is kind of lean on steroids, basically. But I think a couple of the key points about OCF is that the strategy, people kind of get stuck on the 50% reduction, and although the 50% reduction is very, very important, it's about the biggest piece of it is like feeding our contractors and being consistent with the work. It helps them start the work and finish the work. In the past, what we've done is we would start something just to start so that we could say that we had started and we were going, and we would start and stop, and then we would move the contractor somewhere else because that's where the next piece of work was, because we didn't have everything that we needed to finish what we had originally started. And one of the concepts about OCF is that when we start something, we tell them when we want them to start, and then we tell them when we want them to finish. And it means that when we start, we have everything that we need to get the job done, so that we're not giving them a whole bunch of inefficiencies by moving them all over the place all the time. It also allows us to not have to work double shifts and the Saturdays all the time. And when you're doing a project of this volume, when you work the contractors 60s all the time through the whole project, they actually get really, really tired, and we don't get the return on the money that we spend, and we don't get the return on the work that they do. It's just not present. So that's one of the biggest things I think about OCF that helps us stay efficient. And also it helps the trades control their...
Can you just focus on this a little bit, because what
Sure.
you said just now is very, very important. I think it's not just people from outside, but anybody who is working very, very hard, long hours for a long period of time. They lose motivation, they're tired, they're stressed, and something needs to change. You need some new energy to bring in. So basically, are you telling me that by starting something and finishing it and working on smaller sprints, I guess,
yes,
that helps the motivation, it helps the moral of...
Yeah, it allows them to, and that's a good point that you made. We do control the amount of work that starts at that time too, right? We call that batching. And so we tell them exactly how many tools are in that batch, when they're going to start and when they're going to finish. And so it's a much easier way for them to see the finish line, basically. When you have 100 tools in flight.
Because it's smaller steps, basically.
That's right.
It's a lot easier to see smaller steps than to see the whole,
Yeah. And that's what happens in the past. We have 100 tools. Let's just say we have 100 tools that we've started, and we've started them all at different times, and they all have different durations. If all of them are 20, 30, 40, 50% done, we haven't turned anything over to the factory at all. We're still in a different phase and a different percentage of those completions. It doesn't help turn the tools over at all. So right now, we know that we can control when those tools start and stop, and we know when they're going to be finished much, much better.
Sounds like you have to be very, very disciplined, very firm, and, stick to the plan.
That's right. You get it. So part of OCF is also that discipline piece, right? We have to lock those batches.
Is it one of the principles, by the way? Sorry.
It isn't one of the principles, but it is one of the boundary conditions.
How difficult or easy was it to get other people on board with working with this strategy?
So it was probably one of the hardest things that I had to do, because when I started, we already had contracts in place with all of our contractors. And so we had already started the schedule. We had those durations loaded into P3, we call it P3. So the contractors had already seen what the actual durations were supposed to be. So we had to go through this, start it before the contracts were modified, and then get people to believe in the concept at the same time. So it was actually one of the biggest challenges that we had. So we had to redo our contracting strategies, which we worked on at the same time as changing the schedule. And I just made a call. I said, look, load the durations, just take the 50% and change everything in the schedule right now, so that we can see if the project will actually, even end when the 10 months is up. So we went ahead and we took a leap of faith, loaded them into the schedule, and then we, on the backside, we pulled all the contractors into a room more than once, and kind of ran them through what the concepts were and got their alignment. There was some pushback from them originally, but once we started showing them the data, they understood it and it made sense to them. And so we got them on board, and we've been doing it, like I said, we've been doing it for over, I think, 14 months now.
So when you saw these principles, did you get it right away, or did it take some convincing?
So for me personally, I got it right away. I've been, like I said, I've been back and forth in and out of construction my whole 21 years. Most of my time has been in construction, but I've been able to, since I started as a tool owner, I have seen the constraints put in front of the contractors. And I will tell you this, if we give the contractors what they need, 99% of the time, they will hit those dates without hesitation. They're good. They know their work. They know their worth. But most of the time, we're in their way. We don't provide them with everything that they need, so they can't get their job done, right? And to be honest, on this side of the fence, I don't feel like they've had the right amount of support. And so that's why I came over, was to be able to provide that for them. And I want to help them, and I want to make it better. And we're going to get there. We still got a lot of work to do, but I've learned a lot over this last year. I know the things that I missed when we started out, and I know how to make it better for the next project. So, I mean, I think there's still, there's probably still some people out there that don't necessarily love OCF, but I think what they don't love about it is that we're not always able to provide them with what they need when they need to get started, right? If we did give them everything that they needed, we've shown that we can execute really, really well.
But this is part of the whole thing, isn't it? That you tell whoever is involved, you tell them what you can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just have to be disciplined and not start too early. It's in our nature, because we want to get stuff done and we want to keep people busy. And I still think there's some hesitation when we say it's a no-go, right? Because one of the things that we do monitor for OCF is a go no-go process. And part of that no-go is if they don't provide us with what we need to get started, then we don't start. And our nature is to, let's just do something. Let's just get things going. And we can do that in the background, like physically do it. But when we click the box in the schedule and we tell them that we've started, we assume all of the responsibility at that point. And I won't do that anymore, because because we're at 50% reduction, we need that full duration to get this stuff done. This stuff is hard, and we're going fast, and these tools are big tools. So I just won't do it anymore. I don't say no just to say no. When I say no, I have the data to back up the reason why I say it. You know, I want to give the factory what they need. I want to make wafers. That's why we're here. We all want to get paid. But if we don't have what we need, we've got to wait.
Do you have some data to show us?
I don't have it pulled up, but I have. We do have our go no go charts, and we record that data every week. Let me see if I can find it actually. The information is very telling, because it shows about 40% of the time we don't have what we need to start the program. And so we give that information to the factory. So this is kind of a breakdown of what our go no go charts have looked like from work week 35 of 2021 to work week 21 of this year. So almost a year. So you can kind of see that, you know, and we also record what our leading indicators are. So the reasons why we can't start, we have tool owner support and prefab equipment as our top two indicators. And they have been those indicators from the very beginning. So that tells you that from a construction perspective, our contractors have not been our gate. So this is again, the prefab start go no go for the starting last year going into this year. So you can see that we have, you know, from last year to this year, it's about 40% of our go no go status. 40% of the time we either are going with exception or we're saying it's a no go. So we don't always have what we've started. And I think the interesting piece about this is that even though we haven't had everything we needed every single time, the program is still very successful. We are finding ways to keep the contractors very busy and keep them consistent through the program. Now, as we're getting into different constraints, just from like a worldwide perspective with material and stuff like that, it's not ideal for us, again, because we want to keep the contractors moving and starting and stopping when we, exactly when we want them to. But there are different constraints kind of getting in our way right now. We can't get raw material. So, PVDF and just, even strut is hard for us to get. The lead time is like a year. So we have to figure out what those workarounds look like. But what I think a good story for OCF is that even if we don't have everything that we want, we're still making it happen. We didn't think that we would get through batch 8 when we started this. And right now we have started batch 14. And we have delivered everything that the factory has asked us to. We have not gated or limited the ramp in any way, shape, or form. Had we done construction the old way, we wouldn't have made it. There's no way. We do have to change the way that we are doing our work, right? We have to change how we feed the contractors. We have changed the batching strategy alone has changed how we do our work. We've not done that before ever. And so just that piece of it alone, let's just say we didn't even do 50% reduction. If we batch the tools based off of when the factory needs them, that's a completely different concept than what we've done in the past. In the past, we've concentrated on wafer start ties, and wafer start ties doesn't move the wafers through the tools the way that we need them to. So incremental wafer starts, that's how we did it with the batching. And that's really, really, it's an imperative change. We've not done that ever before. And I've always asked the question, because I've been on the engineering and the factory side as well. I'm like, why do we put the tools in the schedule this way? It makes no sense, because we have these great big peaks and valleys, right? And the wafers don't even travel through the fab that way. So we're asking for tools before we need them. And so we've got it lined up. So now when we ask for the tool, we actually need it. So if we don't deliver that tool when it's in the schedule, we are going to limit the ramp. It's kind of scary, but that's one of the major things that we've changed. It's very, very important about how we're running the program now versus how we used to do it in the past.
Does it not add to the pressure though? Because as you said, if we ask for the tool, it means that we actually need it. So, what if they don't provide now?
So one of the things that we have built into the strategy is that we have a little bit of flexibility on the backside. So, but it's also very high risk. So it does add to the pressure. And I think more on the Intel side, because we don't necessarily, we do educate the contractors, but we don't tell them everything about it, because for that, some of that very reason right there, I don't want them to be more stressed out about it. But when we're getting down to the nitty gritty and there's a couple tools that we have at risk, and it's our fault, let's just say it's based on progress only. We've misjudged how we're going to get the tools done. We do have to put other things in place if we ever got into that, into that piece. And it would be, can we work a night shift? Can we work a Saturday or two to recover this particular tool? But for the most part, we don't have to get into that space, because we've allotted ourselves enough time. And part of this, one of the principles is pull planning. If we pull plan the tool and it fits within the duration that we've given it, there should be no reason why we can't get that done.
So tell me, can anybody use OCF?
Anybody can use OCF. I think the way that you use OCF will be different, even at Intel, for each site. Each project has its own deliverables that they have to meet, and so they modify it based off those deliverables. But it doesn't have to be semiconductor. It can be anything. Anybody can come in and figure out what these principles can do for them, and they can apply it very easily. I suggest they do it at the beginning of a project versus the middle of a project. It is a lot more difficult to rewrite contracts and get people on board with a completely different concept. But I think that if you have the right leaders in place, anything is possible.
Well, with that tone, I can only thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for your time, Tabitha.
Of course, I'm happy to talk to you.
ואתם שצפיתם בנו, אני מקווה שהפקתם תועלת רבה מהשיחה, ואנחנו נתראה בשיחה הבאה.